Ooh,
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Feminine and the Masculine and Masterheart. Hi, Dirk, and thank you for joining us for yet another episode.
thank you, Rhonda. I'm beyond excited to be with you, so I can't wait to dive into things.
Yes. So today we will be talking about trauma and healing, this big subject that has been a topic of interest for the past few years. And we're starting to learn so much about this concept that we didn't learn about before. Even experts are starting to learn more about um, this topic, and this is something that we all need to be learning about. So I'm excited to hear from you about this subject, Dirk, and um, to receive your wisdom on this subject and how you can help us to contribute to our own healing. But
Mhm.
before that, I would like to ask you, Dirk, when we talk about trauma, I know like when I started learning about the subject, what would come to my mind is that, okay, if like the concept of trauma, it must be about me witnessing war, let's say, or seeing with my own eyes the death of a loved one, or maybe sexual violation. Um, and so we're always thinking of like the big things. And sometimes we would say, for example, after learning that, our childhood experiences could cause us trauma, some of us would think, okay, I don't have trauma since I have loving parents. Then I probably don't have any kind of trauma. And so there's a lot of misconception around that subject. So given that, how would you like define trauma? How can you explain to us this concept so that we can better understand it and relate to it?
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that because I was that one person who said, I don't have trauma because I grew up in a loving family back in the Netherlands. And are you kidding me? Poor people who have trauma. I was lucky. Um, Then I started realizing that my life was not always working that I hoped it would work. It was not always clear to me what was happening. I felt off, I felt disconnected sometimes. I did things that I wasn't proud of, or could be anything that I thought I didn't recognize. A deeper sense of what I had from myself that I didn't recognize. And in hindsight, if I look back, I turn over my shoulder and look back at my younger self, then I think that's trauma. When I said that I was lucky enough that I didn't have any trauma. And it's tricky to use the word trauma because we start easily boxing it in. It's the same that I work in the field of trauma or PTSD. And then people say you cannot call PTSD. It's not a disorder. It's an injury. And whatever word we use, it doesn't matter. We
Mhm.
definitely know that something is off with us, and we often don't notice it in the moment, or we at least we don't know what happens. That's the tricky part. And that's also what I see with the people that I work with is that when they got diagnosed that something was really wrong by a doctor from our medical system, don't know that it's always the best diagnosis, but at least when you get diagnosed with something, at least you have the system has acknowledged that you're not completely whole and that you're not nuts or completely went crazy, but definitely something happened in your system. And that is often a huge help for people to being diagnosed with whatever it is. I never got diagnosed with anything, and most of the 8 billion people on this planet never got diagnosed with anything. We just
Mhm.
feel that something is off, and I definitely see it currently in the world, um, where we have many ways to deal with that, or sometimes mask that where we get overly positive and we're looking for the self-help branches and we start celebrating the beauty that we are, which is true. But at the same time, we're not sure what to do with that piece that feels a bit darker inside of us. And that's in very simple words when you talk about you don't have to be living in a war zone where planes are dropping bombs over your head in order to feel that something is not right.
Mm. Thank you for sharing this, Dirk. So I want to like emphasize on this word that you said, we're no longer feeling whole. And this does um, explain to some extent exactly what happens inside of our brain when the trauma happens, because it creates this part within us that is wounded, and then some other parts are trying to manage that wound, and sometimes that management means refusing that part or dissociating from it, and like rejecting it in some way. And so um you also mentioned that sometimes we may not be aware of what has happened. And so do you think that we really need to know the exact event that has happened so I could start feeling whole within myself, so that this sense of, there's something wrong, there's something not how I want it to be within me, so I can like work it out? Do I have to know exactly where this came from, what the event that has created that, in order to, create that healing for myself?
No, it's a really, really good question. And one of the things that is the antidote to trauma is this. What I always feel is when you want to understand me, when you listen to me, when you're present with me, and that is one of the biggest gifts that we can give each other, by the way. So, no, the trauma, the tricky part in our world of treating trauma, let's put big pharma out of this.
Mhm.
Um, is still that we, in therapy land, for example, we want to go back to the event,
Yeah.
and we want to go back to what I call the story. And there is a very, very fine line by understanding what happened then and where you're at now, compared to re-energizing that trauma part of the story that invoked the trauma in the first place. And a lot of therapists that I know maybe do not fully understand that, and therefore, with the best intentions, there is this traumatizing because people have to go back to a certain event. And going back to more the essence of your question, is that um, what we do in our treatment is we say, okay, something is off in our body. We've recognized that. If you look in the physiology, which we can do, what happens in the body, and then we connect it to an event or a multiple series of events and say, oh, that happened, therefore I'm this. That's fine. That is an initial understanding. That's okay. But ultimately, to transform that, you do not have to go back to the event at all. And that's basically the work that I do. I do not go back to that event. However, when we use the body as a bridge between whatever is stored in our system and it comes to the forefront in our conscious awareness, what I often see is that people get really emotional if they have tears or they become really sad because something has been unlocked and is being released. And people feel that and they don't know what it is. And it's the same what I was talking about earlier when something happens in my life, for example, and I didn't know what it was, but it made me feel different, and I wasn't sure what it was, um, then it's helpful to understand what's happening because
Mhm.
to have, because we have a brain. We don't have to link it to certain events specifically, but at least to understand what is happening in our body and what is the cause. Otherwise, we start doubting ourselves and we start thinking about things that are maybe not true.
Hmm. I love that you mentioned the story behind the trauma, or the story maybe we keep telling ourselves. And what I hear you say is that I can teach my body a new story, or allow my body, more so. What I hear you say is to allow the body to give me a new story, to experience a new story. And it sounds like we're not, what you're doing is not really about like going back to the event, dissecting the incidents that have happened, thinking it over rationally and critically, and trying to view it in another light, or deciding that this is how I'm going to understand it, because we sometimes do that. We are trying to figure things out at the level of the mind, and that does not seem to create a lot of impact on that story that we want to teach, and to teach our body, or that we want to create within our body. And it sounds like what you're telling us is we are more allowing the intelligence within us to do the healing. It doesn't seem like we're like doing something like with our hands, or with our like, it seems like we are just allowing the healing to happen. Big Pharma taught us that the body is designed to deteriorate and age and then die, and then all of this new information is telling us that no, the body is designed to heal. And then you're telling us that we can use that intelligence, that engineering of our body that is designed to heal, to allow that healing to happen.
Well, yeah, and it's a really deep dive into the story that we've been fed all along, in whether you live in the Middle East, whether you live in Canada where I live, where I grew up in the Netherlands, it's the same story that we are flawed human beings and
Mhm.
that our system is actually very vulnerable and that we can easily get sick and we have to be careful that we don't die too early. And then there is a rescuer, in this case, part of the system. That's, for example, Big Pharma. And what we're teaching people basically is that they are insignificant and that they need support from an external system. And that's very far from the truth of who we really actually are. And to get back to your earlier point about the story, um, when you I always say that emotions, because emotions are part of that, and I say emotions are often overrated. I'm not
Mhm.
really interested in people's emotions. I'm more interested in the person behind these emotions, who is experiencing these emotions. That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the heart of a person because emotions are these are chemical changes based on certain events. If something happens and you actually become really angry, which you have a good reason to become angry, and that enables the body to do something to protect you, for example, which is good. And if multiple of these events happen in your life, then what happens is that the chemical changes, the chemistry in your body changes significantly when there's anger, for example. And there is a different cocktail of chemistry in the body. And so if you experience that often enough, because you live in an area where you have the reason to be angry on a regular basis, um, that chemistry gets used to it and your body becomes dependent on that very specific chemistry and it becomes familiar to the body. And now you have someone as a good friend and she says something and suddenly you become really angry at her. And in hindsight, you think, oh my God, I can't believe I said that because it wasn't even reasonable. You know, it wasn't even applicable. Or you go out in rage about something that you maybe could be angry about a little bit, but not tremendously. So our body becomes addicted to the chemistry that creates what we call, what we feel is the emotion. And same as becoming addicted to a certain substance, let's say alcohol, the body, it's very hard to take away the alcohol for the person because the person feels terrible when you take that away because the body is used to it and it feels familiar and it does something to the system. And that's the same with any emotion. So when you learn, it's a very long way to explaining this, but when you learn to look at the story for what it was back then and your emotional charge, because now you change the chemistry in your body, which reduces the emotions that you feel instead of going to the story and try to make sense of it and then lower the volume. Um, Once that volume has been lowered and you see that event for whatever it was, how terrible it was at that moment, but you don't have that heightened level of emotion anymore, then that trauma, what we call trauma, in my opinion, becomes wisdom. And so you convert trauma into wisdom because you now you can see the essence of what it was. You can have things taken away from that, learning, doing things differently in a next event, and you become wiser with that. And that is the significance of healing trauma. And we haven't spoken exactly about the ways, what you're asking about, but to heal trauma is actually a way of healing ourselves on a soul level. And we've seen that over the last few years where the story wasn't matching up for a lot of people anymore, you know, in the healthcare system and what happened around COVID and all the things. And it was very traumatic for a lot of people. But what also happened is that we begin to see is that we have been fooled on so many levels, you know, by big systems. And to realize that initially can be traumatizing, but then get back and sit with that and think, wow, so I've been living, you know, certain things. They try to tell me lies, but at the same time, I have the opportunity to tap into the wisdom of myself. And now you know, like, let's not focus on the big systems anymore. That's a piece of wisdom. It can be hard initially, but it's a piece of wisdom. And I believe that's how we grow as a human species on what I think is what we call a consciousness level. This is our consciousness rising. And that's why in our program, we always have the term PTG, what we call post-traumatic growth. And that's when trauma, whatever you mean with trauma, it's being transformed into wisdom.
Mm. Thank you for sharing this wisdom with us, Dirk, and empowering us. You're reminding us that I can take my power back from all the stories that I have been telling myself, but also that what the culture has been telling me, even when it comes to my agency and autonomy, when it comes to my own health, that I really am not under the mercy of these big systems, and that there is a bigger power of healing within me. And yes, it's not easy to allow ourselves to think that. We all know it at a very deep level, but to break free from all this programming, it does take a lot of courage, but it's the only way for us to break free from these oppressive systems. And this brings me to the topic of the collective trauma. And this is something that is alive for me right now, being here in Lebanon and witnessing this war. And there's a lot of talk, and I'm attending monthly meetings where we are talking about the collective trauma. And it is good to have a space where we feel heard, we feel accepted for who we are. We're not judged for the feelings that we're experiencing. You mentioned anger. I'm angry at what is happening. I'm angry at a lot of people because of, the what I am experiencing. But is it enough to, just talk about that? And even like, say in my case, healing the collective trauma is, do you feel that we have to have the both parties come in and like sit together and talk about how they caused each other the trauma? Are we as Lebanese people expected to like sit with the Israelis and then talk it out? Is this how we heal this collective trauma? Because at some point I'm thinking it's good that I'm being listened to. This is important for me to be seen, to be heard. But then what? How do I know I have healed this collective trauma? Because I was born during the time where Israel was um, at war with Lebanon. It was invading Lebanon. It was here in Lebanon. Then in 2006, I witnessed that again, and this is the third time. And so, how do you see this idea of collective trauma? I really want to understand this concept beyond just, having these meetings and talking about it, which is okay, but I don't like how does it heal this? How can we heal this collective trauma?
Well, for whatever my insights are worth, whatever you do with this, look at history. And you're just saying, when I was born, and you go long back along the timeline, what we see from history is that we there is always there's a system with leaders, and they have certain agendas. There has been leaders in the past that wanted the best for the people in a country, for example, or in a culture. But it's quite a while ago, and there are maybe some countries in this world currently who have a leader who really wants that. But for most countries that I know, 99.9%, they're serving their own interest on whatever level. And we're using, and this is the tricky part, for the longest, people have trying to figure out when a magician appears onto stage, how they do these tricks. And you kind of look, and you look again, and you look, and you get frustrated because you don't see what they do. And you know that they're fooling you, but you can't figure out what it is. They're really smart. And so if you start focusing on the hand that they show you, you know for sure that you will never figure that out, because they do something else, because they show this hand because they didn't show you this hand here. And they use religion, they use a lot of different things, history. And what I believe personally, what you're saying makes total sense. That it's good to be acknowledged, it's good to be heard, it's good to be seen, and what's the next step? And again, for whatever it's worth to you and to the listeners, I do not believe currently that we should give our power away to big systems and leaders in general. And I think we're being asked, if you really listen with your heart,
Mhm.
I think we're being asked to do this, to connect, to communicate, um, to exchange information with one another, to feel the care from one another, to feel the recharge and energy when you spend time with people who don't have an agenda, who want to hear you, who want to understand you, and to be building a system that serves everyone. And Buckminster Fuller, the visionary in the US, who lived there, he said that always beautifully. I forgot the way exactly how he said it, but if a system is so dysfunctional, don't spend your energy, trying to fight that system. Just build something new that is way more functional, and the old system automatically will become obsolete. And that's what I believe we can do. And in that process, one of the most important things is to look for the things that we have in common as human beings, instead of the things that divide us, because that's where we connect, that's where we feel safe. And when we feel safe and we get back to the trauma, but then our nervous system, um, the activity of our nervous system lowers, and when the level of our nervous system lowers to normal levels, then we have the capacity to be more creative, be more loving, to be more intelligent, to come up with better solutions. But also we give our physical body the message that we're safe, and therefore our body will start healing better. We recharge ourselves better. And so in overall, if you think about the two, our systems talking, come up with solutions, or coming together, as people without the need to push each other, if you don't think the same way, let's first get back to what do we have in common? What do we see from what can we learn from the past, and then continue, what I always love when we connect. You say, for example, I heard you said, or I felt this from you. You try to understand me. You're not kind of thinking like, oh, he's this, or he comes from that, or he grew up in a different culture. He will never understand us as, as people, in Lebanon, for example. Because in the end, whether the bombs are dropping, in your city or in your neighborhood, or you're being watched by big systems right here, let's say in Canada, and people censor you, we all suffer from the same oppression, just in different ways. And that often gives us a very different vision. It says, well, in one country's war and the others have freedom and they can do whatever they want. Well, they can't, but we still don't see that. And so there's a lot to this whole topic, and it's easy to go off into different sidetracks. One of the most important things, I believe, going also back to the question about the story, is that is it possible for us to first take a break, to get to a better place where we can see things more whole, and then make decisions, instead of having these knee-jerk reactions. What the body enables us to do, our nervous system, like, oh yeah, now I need to fight. And it's good sometimes to fight, but sometimes we can be smarter in taking first one pause and say, is this really how I want to contribute to what we're in? And it's of course collective, because we are deeply one. It's a beautiful saying in the spiritual realms. People say, oh, we're one, and they sit on a yoga mat and they breathe and they have all the beautiful things. But we're one on every single level. When we go through pain, when we feel love, when we feel beauty, when we suffer, we are deeply connected. We're not separate.
So you're bringing us full circle back into what you mentioned first about healing of the trauma, where through our consciousness, we're playing part into that healing. And with your description, you're making this very actionable, which is something that I personally like, because I don't like to get lost in all of these like abstract notions of, whatever it is the topic. And so you are making it sound very attainable, very tangible, very practical, and bringing us back to creating new stories around, like, we don't have to keep on focusing on like who was wrong first, who started attacking the other country first, who created the first war, so we can do this collective healing by telling a new story, and then creating these communities where inside which our bodies are going to experience this sense of safety, and then we, like you said, it's going to activate our creativity and our intuition, and we are more aligned to our higher self. And so it sounds like this collective healing is really about breaking free from these oppressive systems. This is what feels to me as the collective healing that I heard from you. So, in essence, it is breaking free from all of these systems, taking our power back from these systems through becoming conscious of how we are playing a part in upholding these systems. And I know that you are really passionate about, you know, playing a very active part in uh, taking your power back, but also empowering us to liberate ourselves from these systems. And when it comes to healing, you're doing that with very non-conventional healing modalities, even when it comes to healing trauma. So tell us what you are now using in terms of helping your patients heal from, or your clients um, to approach creating this new story, creating this new sense of safety within their bodies, activating their body's intelligence and this healing engineering within their bodies.
Yeah, so well, first of all, I use a lot of my own intuition and wisdom that I get from somewhere, but I also have been studying, I've been learning with um, Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote the book "The Body Keeps the Score." He's one of the most known trauma experts in the world that I got my training through, a long time ago. But what I especially see in the world that I work in, all the years that I've lived, is that first of all, connection in a safe way. So safe connection is one of the most important ones. It's the first thing that I do. On Monday, actually, I am supposed to start with a new group of men who have been severely traumatized because of the service that we're doing to the country as military.
Mhm.
The first thing I do is I literally create a safe space. Um, and I literally do that when, for example, we're in a bigger building. I said, this door, when we are in this room together, it's a big room. It's like a living room. It's cozy. But I said, this door is always locked and nobody can ever walk in. So, because they're hyper vigilant. So we
Mm.
need to create a safe space, not just metaphorically, but also literally. And
Yes.
then I believe very much so in a piece of education. You need to learn about what you've been told. I like to challenge these beliefs because if you, and I've realized that especially in the last few years, more so, is that if you want to heal yourself, you have to do that not within the constraints of a system that you believe in that is holding you actually hostage. You
Yeah.
cannot do that. You cannot sit in an airplane, where you kept being hostage and then try to heal from something that you feel so traumatized by because you still have the people who take you hostage, and having you at gunpoint. You cannot heal in that way. So you can only heal when you are being set free and to look at the systems initially might be very upsetting, as you and I know, to say like they've been lying to us all along. Yeah, okay. After a few months, you could say, and now what?
Mm.
And so, what do we do about this? And so that's when I use the physiological, the physical body further. I show them how it is possible to lower the activity of their nervous system, to give their body physical new experiences that are safe and that can initially feel very uneasy because the
Mm.
body is not used to that. But the more you give the body new experiences, the more you lower the volume of the trauma and you actually begin to instill new patterns in the body that are more healthy, that are more self-empowering, but also more healing for the physiological system. And and we use brainwave technology where we help the brain get to a better state to get out of that fight or flight state. So we use audio and visual brainwave entrainment to help to get the brain calmer. It's very effective. We use heart coherence. We practice that. It's the foundation of everything I do. We, for example, expose the body to cold water. And that cold water is actually a metaphor for the stressors in our lives. And normally, when we have a stressor, that we see as a stressor, but what is that stressor? Is it a stressor or is it an event that stresses us?
Mm.
And so when we sit in the cold water, and the first thing you want to do is you want to run out and you start hyperventilating because you think you're going to die in the cold water and it's very uncomfortable. But when you learn to not engage anymore with the feeling, that sensation of the cold water on your skin, but you learn to focus within and you focus on your breathing, at some point you distance yourself from feeling the cold and you can sit in that cold water for 2, 3, 4 minutes. And what it actually is doing with the system, it says, actually, I do not always have to tune into everything that's happening around me. I can find my peace inside. And you cannot learn that from books. You cannot learn that from some fancy exercises. This is a very brutal, in a way, very brutal way to learning that, but that's why it's also so effective, because the body gets such a new experience that it will never forget, but it's a very positive one, despite it's stressful. And that relates back to the PTG, the trauma that can make us actually more whole and that can make us also more insightful and make us more, give us more wisdom. One other thing that we all see currently at the planet is that we lose so much energy, whether it's watching the news, even if you're safe somewhere in a state in the US, for example, you think I'm safe here. Poor people wherever in the storms, whether it's in the Middle East or wherever they are, but at least I'm safe. But by watching the news, you stress your body. By noticing what's going on, you stress your body. Maybe you have financial worries. And so all of these things stress the body, but what it also does, it depletes our energy. And when our energy gets depleted, our body doesn't cannot function properly anymore. So what I do personally, and this is not something that I do with my clients because we get funded through Ministry of Veteran Affairs, and I'm not sure if they're really excited when I bring this in, but I expose my own system, my own body to a certain form of energy that is already available in my body. And that's what it's called bioscalar energy. And bioscalar energy is what I call our God-given energy. That's the energy that our cells use to communicate, energy, information. It's a very intelligent system. It's an amazing system. But we look through a very thick lens of big lies and disempowering beliefs. So we diminish actually the capacity of our beautiful system. But what we see is that these cells that communicate with one another have less the capacity to do so when the energy is lower. And that's a vicious circle that goes down. So I expose my own body to that same bioscalar energy being created by once as an invention from Nikola Tesla as scalar energy to my system, which enables my cells to do better work in this world that we're exposed to, and that enables me to give more back, as we talk about. To be, I'm excited about life, and therefore I also want to share that with everybody else. So the scalar part is for me also really important, and these are just some examples. But you remember what I started with, and that's the feeling safe part, and that's the connection part. And although I love, supporting you in what we do here online, one of the things that I know for sure every time when I walk away, I get charged because I believe in this. I believe in us. I believe in the connection, and that's very healing.
Thank you for telling us about all of the healing modalities that you use. And I want to tell you that this is exactly how I feel as well at the end of every interaction between us. And so I know that for everyone who is listening to us and they want to learn more about this bioscalar healing modality and they find it interesting, because it is really interesting and it's very effective. I would like to encourage them to reach out to you to learn more about that, and like take their power back from all these systems that are designed to um, which sole purpose is to hold us hostages and to take our power uh, away. So if we want to start, if I want to tell you, Dirk, I want to start with my healing. Maybe I don't have this bioscalar energy right now. What would you recommend that I would start with um, to start giving my body this new story? I want to teach my body a new story. What would you recommend that I would do on a daily basis that would at least get me started?
My question to you would be, do you really want it, even if it's uncomfortable, or are you looking for a quick solution?
Yeah. Wow. Well, facing that within us is is not easy, because most of us, yes, we want something quick because we have trained our nervous system for, things happening very fast.
Well, what you know as one other, and what is really powerful is to, from all the thinking, from all the busyness, from everything that we do in our life. Your life looks quite different from my life, although we have so much in common. But there's one thing we have in common for sure, you and I, and everybody on the call, and that is we all have 24 hours a day, every single day. And the commitment, the deal that you want to make with yourself, it says, is it possible for me, in all the challenges that I have in my life, is it possible to start with half an hour from all these 24 hours to do something that is really that I need to feed myself with? And if the answer is I'm not so sure, depending on my agenda, depending on things what are going on, then I think the intention is there not yet, really. And I see that quite a bit. I work with people so much, and I am often more passionate about these things, although they believe to be true in some level, but they still don't do it. And I keep challenging them. I said, if you really want to change, can you just take half an hour, out of your day? And that is, for example, to sit, to not think. And what you teach also, to take some deeper breaths and to just sit with yourself. And if you feel really shaken by everything that happens, I don't know if we did it last time, you could put your right hand, I did it yesterday with a group, put your right hand under in your left armpit, and you put your left hand around on your arm. And this is a very, very calming way where you feel the boundaries of your body. And if you take a few deeper breaths, for example, you feel the safety, maybe not immediately, but after you sit here for 1 or 2 minutes and you breathe some deeper, and every time you start thinking about the silly things that we do here or all the trouble that you have in your life, is it possible for you to redirect yourself back, feeling that breath flowing through you? Everything, that's everything. And every time your mind wanders off, just take a few breaths. Continue to breathe, but then refocus on your breath, noticing that you're holding that that box, which is your body, wherever you experience everything in. And just to start a few minutes of doing this, not trying to find solutions, not trying to do anything, repair anything, not to wonder whether you breathe in the right way, not to judge anything, not to analyze anything, just to sit there for a little bit. And what happens is that the rhythm of your heart start changing, and it starts aligning more with the frequency of the field that we all live in, and you have access to deeper intuition. This is where you suddenly, after you've been sitting like this for a couple of minutes, you think, huh, you know what? This is what I'm going to do differently. Where you suddenly get a little insight. That's what I would start first. This is why I do these kind of coherence hotspots, because also to have the connection with one another,
Mm.
to have maybe a trusted friend that you've been knowing for so long. Maybe even this friend is not aware of what you are aware of. And maybe this friend is thinking politically a little differently, but you have shared so much in your life already with one another that you just bypass all the belief systems and you connect heart to heart and maybe have a conversation on that level, because you have more in common than often we think or we remember that we have, because we have been thinking about all the things that are currently dividing us. So these are, I think, some of the first steps. I personally, and this is something maybe you do not resonate at all with, most people don't, but I every morning I get up. I usually have a hot shower just to wake up, and I'm standing there waking up, and then at the end I always finish with a minute or 2 minutes of cold water, depending on how cold the water is in your house. Just turn it off and to take a few slow breaths. No matter what you feel, no matter how cold it is, you just take a few breaths. And what you're doing is you're training your body to become really healthy, to become also more resilient to the outside world. And then once you close the tap and you start drying yourself off, you feel almost this euphoria where you feel energized. There's something different after the pain.
Mhm.
This is at the same also a metaphor what from all that we have been talking about. So is it possible for us not only to stay under the well-known feeling safe and comfortable warm shower, um, but to change something so significantly that we break free from the shackles of all our belief systems. And that's when I think is a big part of the healing in itself without doing any smart ass approaches.
Thank you for making things very simple and very doable. Yet again, for those of us who are willing to do that, and I also don't want our audience to miss out on something that you have previously mentioned. Before we started this talk, when we were chatting, you were telling us about the importance of natural light.
Mm,
I was
yeah,
telling you that I had learned recently about how much energy our nervous system consumes because of the nature of the neurons and the mitochondria in the neurons. And you were telling me how important it is to get sun exposure during the day.
yeah, yeah. So thanks for that reminder. I don't want to go too far at this point, given the time, to go down into a rabbit hole why we're actually exposed to all the light that we're exposed to on the screens that we connect currently through the lights that are in office buildings and all the things, even the sun that is often being blocked these days and which is also being admitted because our most energetic power and the power to our deeper health and wisdom lies in exposure to natural light. Um, the electromagnetic spectrum, that's
Mhm.
basically everything there is that contains sound frequencies, but also light frequencies. And there are specific frequencies that our system needs. Your skin is like a conductor, is an absorber of the light, and that light contains information. And that information is being used by the mitochondria in your cells. And the mitochondria in your cells is like the powerhouse that gets your body going, keeps you healthy and all that. And if you look too much at a screen, for example, which is very high levels of blue light, that is very unhealthy, and that takes away the capacity to further heal. So the big lie that we've been told is say shield yourself from the sun, and put sunscreen on and these kind of things and sunglasses. So if you can, let's say every morning, especially in the morning, the first sun rays early in the morning, you get them on your skin. as much skin exposed as possible, no sunglasses, and allow that light to enter your system that contains all of the information for healing. And as soon as you start blocking all of that, as soon as you put sunglasses on, as soon as you get inside, you get under the blue light, we dysregulate our entire system. And we cannot even compensate it with healthy thinking. We cannot compensate it with healthy food. This is really, really important. And we could always do in the future, some separate session about that. But that's light, water, and magnetism are the three main things that keep us really healthy. And we
Mhm.
cannot separate, as you know, the physical body and the healthy mind and emotional state. So they're all deeply connected. So to expose yourself to learn about these things is one, then
Mhm.
to live these and practice these is another one. And then also what we talked about in the hour before now is to keep as much as possible a healthy mind and an open heart. Um, and that's, I think, a used boost for seeing and noticing, feeling changes in your life.
Thank you so much for sharing these tips with us, Dirk, because I know a lot of us needed that because we're not conventionally, we're not often empowered that way to take things into our hands and to realize that we really can do something about our own healing. It's not in the hands of some entity outside of us. It's really um, within us. So thank you for empowering us with all of these approaches to healing, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with us around the topic of trauma. And we are almost at the top of the hour. We've been going for like an hour. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we go?
Well, we've covered so much.
Yes.
I think the expression that a lot of people know but do not live yet is where the attention goes, is where the energy flows. Just sit with that for a moment and think about that because it's really true. And the intention behind everything you do, because we lose our capacity for focused intention because we get distracted by almost everything in our lives, and that disempowers us. And so when we can have focused intention, and it's not when we are in this process, it's not putting our middle finger up, towards the system and doing try to just we're not sitting every day and look at the snakes or look at the wasps, how evil they are, that they can sting us, they can bite us, and we begin thinking that they're evil creatures. We just know that things in this world work a certain way, and once we have come to terms with that, our next step is, can we just take the power back in a good way? And when we take our power back, that doesn't mean putting our middle finger up, towards everything outside of us. No, let's just bring our power back collectively. We talk about collective trauma.
Yeah.
Get get together with people who believe and want to know and want to learn more on that same level, because the antidote to collective trauma is to collective connection, collective heart connection. And just maybe after this, watching this, I would recommend, if you have the time, sit for another 5 more minutes after we end this and sit with that for a little bit. Feel into how this was being received by you, and not to overthink too much, but maybe feel the essence of this. And then get back to Rhonda, for example, and say, hey, I want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was beautiful, and I know that it will have an impact on our audience. So thank you for empowering us with your knowledge and your wisdom. Thank you, everyone who watched this live, and to everyone who's going to watch the replay. I will, as usual, be leaving the links to Dirk's website and his page on Facebook. You can always reach out to him to ask him about anything that we have mentioned today in this episode. And we will see you in the next episode. Thank you, Dirk.
Thank you so much, Randa. Much care.
Bye bye. Thank you. Bye.